Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for episode 82 of the show. I am your host, Louise H. Reed. With listeners in over 145 countries and millions of iTunes and ongoing podcasts, iTunes downloads and ongoing podcasts, I'm the fortunate host here every Tuesday to talk life and leadership with everyday people doing extraordinary things. People who, like our guest today, take brave, bold action in pursuit of their dreams and goals and are here to share their journey to help you do the same in yours. You hear me say time and time again that there is nothing more valuable than time. And as my way of saying thank you to you for listening each and every week, I like to give some awesome swag away. Simply comment on a podcast episode, any podcast episode, with the hashtag LadyBossLoyalty, and you are automatically entered into a draw to win some exclusive Lady Boss Loyalty swag. There is new swag coming soon. I've been saying that for a few weeks now. And so as soon as it arrives, I will be making another draw. So please comment away and good luck. Now, without further ado, let me introduce you to today's special guest. Today we have with us Kristin Sherry. Kristin is a career consultant, speaker, trainer, and four-time author of Amazon bestseller YouMap. She is the managing partner of YouMap LLC, which certifies aspiring coaches, recruiters, career services, and HR professionals as YouMap coaches and workshop facilitators. Kristin has been a featured career expert on Wharton Business Radio, a DisruptHR speaker, and has contributed to Entrepreneur Magazine and Inc.com. Her fourth book, Your Team Loves Mondays, right? Helps managers become more effective and releases February 20th, 2020. Kristin, my friend, welcome to the show.
My heart is about to burst out of my chest.
I'm so excited. That makes me so happy.
You know, if anyone listening, if I was on your podcast in 2019, please don't get hurt. But I did about 25 podcast episodes and secretly was like, boy, would I ever love to be on the Louise H. Reed radio show. But I feel like asking is sort of like inviting yourself to dinner. So I never would have asked. So when you asked me, I was just so smitten.
That's the best story ever. I love that. And thank you. And we said this when we just connected, that I don't know how this hasn't happened before, because we have certainly been connected quite significantly on LinkedIn. And I've been watching the explosion of YouMap, and I can't wait to jump into that and learn more about this on the show, and share that with some of the listeners who perhaps have not heard of YouMap. So anyway, all that to say, I've been just watching you and cheering you on the sidelines, and here we are finally together. So I think we're both as happy as one another. So, so many exciting things to explore. Clearly, based on your bio, you are very successful in your career. What I'd like to do is be able to pull the curtain back a little bit, rewind the clock. I kind of feel like I'm a huge Wizard of Oz fan. And, when they get to Oz, how they pull back, ignore the man behind the green curtain.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to do a little bit of that. So let's meet the woman. Let's meet the woman behind YouMap. So turning back the clock, let's explore the journey of how you got here. Perhaps starting with one of my favorite questions, which I don't ask everybody, is what did little Kristin want to be when she grew up? Little 5 or 6-year-old Kristin. What did that child want to be?
So it's amazing that I actually did grow up, because I was quite a mischief maker. So surviving childhood was my first success.
I knew we'd be friends.
My mother used to say that I had all of the qualities of an excellent leader, and it was her job not to kill me. So when I was a child, I think it's very common for people to look at their parents or someone in their life that they love or respect and randomly just choose to be what that person is, right? Because we don't really know how we're wired and what our gifting is or our interests as children. And so we're asking kids this question, what do you want to be? And I think we should ask them who they want to be, the type of people they want to become, rather than a job title. But I wanted to be a police officer when I was a small child, and then I wanted to be a doctor when I got to be around high school.
So I want to go to jump into the question that you just said we perhaps should be entertaining or asking our children, who do you want to be? I love that. I think that's a really fun thing to explore. Why is that a better question?
Well, first of all, ask a 40-year-old what they want to be when they grow up and see how well they field that question. So I don't know that a 6-year-old is going to be much more prepared with practically no life experience outside of maybe pooping in diapers, and they haven't really done much, right? So I think it's a better question because character is always what's most important in life. My father used to say to me that when you strip everything away from you, at the end of the day, all you're left with is your character. And so if that isn't our preeminent focus in life, we can really get taken off course pursuing success and status or fame or admiration or all of the other things that actually return void and don't give us a whole lot of satisfaction. But you'll never regret investing in your character. And so I think when we ask the question of what do you want to be when we grow up, children have no idea. And they're saying things like, oh, I'd like to be a teacher because they see a teacher every day in their classroom. Mm. But they may have zero strengths associated with teaching. And they may not even enjoy what that day-to-day looks like because they don't really know the behind the scenes, the behind the curtain that you're speaking of, what it means to be a teacher or a police officer or a doctor. So if you ask children, who do you want to be? I think it gives them the proper focus on, I want to be kind. I want to be a giving person. I want to make a difference in the world. I want to help people, whatever the case may be. And then that helps them. And so what we do is we ask them what they want to be when they grow up. And then we work on the adults to get down to the values and focus on it, because that's where satisfaction comes from, instead of starting with children with those questions.
I love that. So who do you want to be?
Oh, that's easy. I'll just give you a little story. Years ago, I was not a service-oriented person. I was very self-absorbed in my own life when I was young and what I wanted. And I went to a funeral and I listened to what people said about the person who had passed away. And it was very jarring to me. I thought to myself, first of all, you would never fill a room with people except for the obligated to come to my funeral. And second of all, I can't fathom anyone saying these types of things about me. And I decided to make a change in my life that day. I was 17, 18, I can't remember exactly. And I said, I want people who come to my funeral to say that their life was better because I was in it. And so when you really boil it down, I want people to feel like their life is enriched because they know me. And that could be through a variety of ways, but I want to be someone who gives to people so that it has an impact on them.
Wow. And then that opens up so many possibilities, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways you can do that, but I think that's why it's really important to know who you are, because sometimes we try to be something to people that's really goes against our wiring, and then we're really having to endeavor and work at that. So you may not be the person who makes people laugh and you want to be, but maybe you're just not naturally funny and that's okay. But maybe you're the person that listens and shows empathy, and that person feels seen and understood and valued. And that's just as important as giving someone laughter, maybe even more important. I don't know. It depends on your values. But I think if you know yourself, it equips you to know how you can add value to people's lives.
I love that. So here you were at 17 having a pretty profound moment, a pretty pivotal moment in your life that sounds like it changed the trajectory of your life at that point. What happened next? Because the reason I'm asking this, you've heard me ask these kinds of questions before to other guests on the show. I think it's really, really neat when we can unpack what happens in these pivotal moments. So what did we, what were the first things that we did? How did we start to shift our life? Because everyone has these moments. So many of us do not know what to do in these moments, so do nothing. So I'd love for you to be able to share with us what happened next after that moment.
Well, I think it's important to say that change and transformation is a gradual process. It's not an overnight thing. And so if you still stumble backwards or fall or fail, know that you're a work in progress and not to give up. So when I was a teenager and a young adult, I had a bit of a temper and I was bullied. And I don't know if the temper came first or if I developed a temper because I was bullied, but I really was over it. And so I started to fight back, but it didn't really end up positive because I would get suspended from school. Even though I hadn't started it, I had so much pent up anger from people picking on me that that person was getting, the 3 bullies before then, they were really getting that kind of, because I was a little socially awkward. I was sort of introverted. So the first thing that happened was I stopped being angry. So I would flip people off in traffic if they looked at me sideways. I mean, I was very reactive. And so I said to myself, if I go through life being this way, I'm going to have children and they're going to need therapy. And it's just going to create all of these problems having this temper. People could provoke me to anger very easily. And that's one of the things that really changed. I remember telling my oldest son that I had a temper when I was younger. And he said to me, I can't picture you yelling or being angry. And I thought, well, that's a testimony that he doesn't even have any concept of that behavior. So that's probably the first major change.
Wow.
That my anger went away and I replaced it with patience and really tried to do 2 things. First of all, realize that you don't know the burdens that other people carry, so you should always be kind to them. And that it's easy to make a lot of assumptions about people, and I started to give people the benefit of the doubt. And I think it really came down to empathy, right? Putting myself into the situation when I realized this person's hurting me because someone hurt them. Mm-hmm. And really being able to have compassion for that.
So many things to explore there. Firstly, and most importantly, thank you for sharing that. That's a hard time to go through at a young age. It reminds me of a seminar that I went to. One of my boys has severe learning disabilities and comes with a variety. It's very complex. It's quite a beast to start to learn about all of the intricacies and the layers of all of that. Anyway, I went to a seminar by a psychologist, and he said 2 words, and he repeated them twice, and it stuck with me. And it just to echo what you're saying, he said, hurt people. Yeah. And it changed everything. While nothing had changed, it in fact had changed everything. And so I think that was a very wise thing for you to learn at that age. So as you then started to make some small shifts, and often it's the inside that shifts before the outer, isn't it? The transformation really, the big transformation start inside, and no one's noticing necessarily yet. So the police officer, did you pursue that? Walk us through how you started to, embark on a career in your journey, and help us fill the gap between there and YouMap, where you are now.
So I did not pursue that. My father was a police officer for 31 years, and he talked me out of it, which is interesting because we're different people. So I'm telling you now in hindsight that I wouldn't have enjoyed it, but I don't know that I thought that at the time. But my father really hated his job, but he was a very responsible, he's alive. I'm talking about back in when he's retired now, but he was very responsible and disciplined. And so he went to work every day, and the whole idea of career transition was not really a thing. My dad's 75, so he put in his 31 years, even though he really didn't like the work. And he said to me, don't do that career. It's full of the dregs of humanity. That's what he said to me, which is sort of a depressing statement. But my father came face to face with people at their worst all the time. And people tried to stab him and shoot him, and he's pulled dead bodies out of rivers, and he didn't want that for me. So he talked me out of it. So when I was in high school, I thought, well, I will go to medical school. And I wanted to be a neurologist. I even got a license plate that said MD2B.
I love that.
I would never do that now, which is sort of funny, but you know, I was 18. So I did go to a pre-med program, and I studied neuroscience, and I love neuroscience, and I liked dissecting brains, but I actually went and spent time with a neurologist, and the first question he asked me is, do you want to get married and have kids? And I said, yes. And he said, okay, well, just know that this profession is not very family friendly. And that really got me thinking about what type of balance I wanted in my life. So I did not pursue medicine for that reason.
Wow. Mm-hmm. I say, wow, almost thank goodness. In one way anyway, because there'll be others, no doubt, who would be able to counter that. And so this is interesting, because it sounds like these are little seeds, little lessons that you learned along your life path, which has contributed to the gem of YouMap. What other experiences then did you go through from a professional and personal perspective that gave birth to this baby?
So I had a huge identity crisis, I have to be honest. When I graduated with my degree in neuroscience and I realized I wasn't going to be a doctor, I told everyone because everyone asks you, what are you doing in college? What are you going to do? What do you want to be? And now you put all that pressure, because I've told 50,000 people that asked me that dumb question. We shouldn't be asking young people.
And so you've got the license plate as well.
That's right.
Right? Yeah.
I did feel like a failure, even though I had decided it wasn't right for me. I felt like I was letting people down, and I did not know what I wanted to do. So I took a job in an executive MBA program at the University of New York at Buffalo. And I was working with all these executives getting their MBA, and I took a micro MBA program, and I thought, well, maybe I'll just do business. And while I was there, the School of Management had a webmaster that managed all the websites, and they were really slow with our updates, and we would have information sessions, and they just couldn't get the updates timely for these weekly sessions. So I learned how to manage the website, and I learned how to update web pages, and I really got an interest in that. And long story short, someone gave me a chance being a programmer, which I had never written a line of code in my life. That was really stressful. I went to an interview, got this job. It wasn't for a programmer, and the HR person showed my resume to the director of IT, and he knocked on my training class to pull me out and showed me this job description. And I'll never forget, I wrote about this in my first book, actually. I said, I don't suffer from a false sense of humility when I tell you I'm not qualified for this job. And he said, okay, well, thanks for coming. And I left. And the next day he came back to the training class, and he knocked again, and he pulled me out. And he said to me, your resume shows me that you're a learner, and I want someone on my team who's a learner. And I'm not asking you if you're qualified for the job. I'm asking you if you think you can learn it. And I said, well, when you put it that way, learner was in my top 5 strengths at the time. I said, when you put it that way, yes. And every day I couldn't wait till 5 o'clock so I could go home, because I felt like I was going to throw up. I was thrown into this technical job, and I had never even taken a computer class. I remember in high school, I thought, why would I take computers? I'll never use a computer. I literally said that. I'll never use a computer.
And so what did you learn from that experience?
So I learned a couple of things. I learned to be brave from that experience, because I went into this IT suite with all men. I was the only woman in there. And you know, it can be a challenge for women to come to the table. You have to be better than all the men in the room to even be taken seriously. And even then, sometimes you're not. But I was not. I was not qualified. So I had to go into this this room with it was a shared suite with these men who knew their technologies and knew what they were doing. And I did not know what I was doing, not by a long shot. But I thought, I'm going to earn my keep here. And every day when I got home from work, I would then get on the internet. It was dial-up back at the time, but I would get on the internet and I would take every class I could learn on how to write ADO, SQL, ASP, VB script, all these things I had never heard of before I got my job description. And I spent every night learning those things. And then I would go and feel sick to my stomach all day and go in at night. And it took me about 30 days to the point where I felt like I can actually contribute here without feeling like I'm a phony. And that experience, while it was awful, has taught me to just jump into anything and I'll figure it out. It taught me I can figure it out.
And I think a lot of us think that until we might be faced with the situation. And often we can shy away from those situations. You couldn't. So kudos to you. I don't know how many people would say yes to that. And kudos to the person, shout out to the person who said, I know you're not qualified, but I see you're a learner. Like, kudos.
I know, we should have more managers who see potential in people. I gave him props in the book for that. His name is Ray Mueller.
Yeah, well, shout out to you, Ray. And so what have you learned about leadership through all of this? Like, how would you define leadership?
I think leaders are the people who are brave to initiate needed change. It's so easy for people to just get caught up in the busy and do what we've always done. Mm-hmm. But I think leaders are the ones who see needed change, create a vision for that change, can then build alignment around it, and then champion that change in their people. And to me, that's a leader. And what I learned about leadership, really, I learned first from Ray. And I learned that you can think outside the box. You don't have to say, okay, this resume lines up with all of these bullets in the job description. So I learned about taking a chance on people, and I learned about aptitude and potential. Was really my first exposure to that in the workplace. And I became that kind of a manager because Ray was that manager for me.
How fortunate to have had that. Mm-hmm. And how unfortunate, which is no doubt why you wrote the book, the book that's coming out in February. Mm-hmm. Many of us have had examples of really, really poor managers.
I've had that too.
Yeah. Or even toxic. Yeah, thankfully I've only had one. I say thankfully that I've even had one, but thankfully it's only been one toxic manager in my life. But that is what started me on my journey of entrepreneurship. So I am even grateful for having had that experience.
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit of how you got started in business. So you're navigating the working world. You're obviously sought after and doing well, very capable of doing anything you set your mind to, as evidenced in this example you just gave. What helped you change that path into what you do now?
So I was a technical person for 11 years, and I moved into business intelligence and analytics from development. And so my job was really to translate data into business insights for pharmaceutical clients. And so we would have a team of developers who would mine the data. They would give me the data, and I would look for trends and I would turn data into information, essentially, and then give the so what to the client. That's really what my job was. And my client really loved me. And they asked me, would you come into operations and lead our operations team? And that was my first experience. I had reporting analysts that I delegated to, but from an HR point of view, I wasn't their manager. I didn't do their performance reviews. I just managed their performance, essentially, like their day-to-day. Yeah. I drove results through them. So I went into operations, and all of a sudden I had 31 direct reports after having none. And wow, that was a very humbling experience. Humbling experience.
How so?
Well, it really showed me my limitations. And So for example, there would be communications in the company that would come down to me, and it wouldn't occur to me to communicate them to my team. And then my team would find out and they would say, why didn't you tell us about this? This is going to impact us A, B, and C. So I learned I had to think further ahead than my team did, farther ahead than my team did, which I wasn't. I was sort of just behaving like an individual contributor in a manager role still, which
Right.
You have to make that shift. The second thing I learned is my team, I learned management is very hard. Mm-hmm. It was very easy to judge my managers as an individual contributor and look at them and say, why do they do this? Why don't they do that? How do they not think of this? And I really thought all they did was sit around all day and field our questions and answer our questions and just wait for us. I thought that's what they did. I really didn't know the behind the scenes responsibilities that my managers had. And
it's kind of like being a parent. Like, kids don't really know what it entails to be a parent, right?
Exactly. And so, yeah, they don't know about all the forms you fill out and all of the appointments you make and the bills that you pay and the other jobs you have that aren't putting them in timeout or making them a sandwich. So yeah, and I had more empathy. It built my empathy for managers. And I realized I used to think that bad managers or poor managers, I don't like to call people bad, but poor managers, ineffective managers, I used to think they were just jerks. And I realized that most people are doing the best they can. And I don't think the majority of people come to work purposely trying to make people's lives miserable. They just don't know what they don't know, and they're not equipped and they don't have the skills. And 2/3 of managers have been thrown into the situation I was without proper training. And then even when you do train people, the culture doesn't really reward you for implementing what you've learned. I mean, you know this as a leadership consultant. You put in required manager training and then your senior manager or director doesn't take it. They blow the courses off. So it's not a priority to you either. And they're not putting into practice what they're teaching in the company. And so there's no reward. Yeah. And so there's no learning transfer.
There. You either are trying then to do the thing that you've learned in the classroom in the context that doesn't support it, or you let it go. You know, you have to, if you can't, what's the expression? If you can't beat them, join them. So yes, I completely, I've seen that and continue.
Oh yeah, I've seen really good leaders enter an organization and they're so different than the culture. They're emotionally intelligent and they listen and they champion for you and you're thinking, this is amazing, but then they can't survive in the culture, so they adopt the culture and then that person dies a little inside and eventually they depart the organization before too long.
So what is your vision for the future in terms of leaders, and what's the hope that you have for those who read your book, which isn't even out yet? I want to get to YouMap, but we're talking about this one right now, so just seems like a lot of sense to talk about.
So Your Team Loves Mondays came from working with people who were that I was trying to help through YouMap, and I realized that. So the statistic is 54%, but I did experience about half of the people when I was coaching, because I don't really coach anymore, but I noticed about half of the people were trying to escape their manager. And I would say to them, a job search is a lot more work than having an honest conversation with your manager. And I would try to coach them around having that conversation before they would hire me to disengage from that organization. But most people were convinced that their manager was not coachable, which I don't know if that was true or not. But my vision for this book is really to create awareness of our blind spots, because I really do believe that managers think they're doing a good job even when they're disengaged. They're causing their employees to become disengaged. A lot of the reasons for disengagement in employees are caused by the leadership, and they are clueless. So I wrote this book in a compassionate way. I'm not beating up managers in the book. I come to the table with the assumption that everyone wants to do a good job. And I credit that to them. And here's practical, simple frameworks and tools that you can implement right now to get better results with your team. So what I really want to do is help people have awareness, first of all, of where their blind spots are, because they don't really always know. There's this interesting psychology that when we have a relationship breakdown, because it's all about relationships, it's always the other person's fault, and we can always come up with justification. So that employee is difficult and bossy and dominant and belligerent, and they don't listen, all these things. But we don't realize that our approach is what created these behaviors in this person. It creates this vicious cycle that I respond out of that assumption, and the person becomes passive aggressive or directly aggressive, whatever happens, and the relationship just breaks down, and then nobody is making any efforts to repair it, and it goes downhill from there. And either the manager starts to try to work the person out of the organization because it's uncomfortable to work with them, or the employee then checks out, quits and stays, or they actively start a job search. There's, different things that happen, but it's often misunderstandings and assumptions that are causing these things. So I try to address a lot of that and really preempt a lot of the problems that happen at all of the critical points through the hiring process. Are you getting the right person in that role in the first place? Because if a person's not performing, it's your fault. Like, it's your fault 100%. I don't care if you didn't hire the person. It's still your fault, because either you don't have a proper hiring or onboarding or training or retention strategy, or you don't know how to invest in that person to see if there's another place in the organization, or you don't know how to respectfully offboard people. There's something going on at every touch point there. So I touch all of those different points that managers need to really be aware of. And I really help them figure out, should you even be managing people in the first place? Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I have asked people, why are you a manager, or why do you want to be a manager? And I'm sure you've experienced the same. There's sort of a blank look on their face, and it's more of a, well, that's just what comes next in the pay scale.
I did a global survey and I asked people, why did you become a manager? And the top 2 reasons were, it was the logical next step in my career. Really? That's interesting. Are you a vertical climber even? That's not my career type. I'm a spiraler, but anyway. And then they said someone gave me the position. So they were just handed a promotion, or they felt it was the logical next step.
Yeah, not a reason, friends, not a reason to be a leader.
No.
At all. So if that is you, there's no judgment being applied here, but perhaps exploration might be worthy. If that is someone who's listening, who thought, oh my gosh, she just gave my answer, what resource would you direct them to?
To determine what they should do instead?
YouMap.
To YouMap.
Tell us a little bit about why YouMap was created. We've heard a little bit of the seeds of it, why YouMap was created, and who it helps.
So I wrote YouMap because I started the process with YouMap, but I wrote the book because it broke my heart when people would call me and hear about my program, because it's a coaching program as well. And they would say, I know I need this, but I can't afford it. Because they would have already told me their story. And now I know they're going off into that situation in perpetuity. And enough people, it was eating my guts away. So I thought, I'm going to take exactly what I do with clients from beginning to end. And I brought in experts to do the resume pieces. I didn't want people contacting me for that. So Carrie Twigg and Kamara Toffolo and Lisa Jones and Patricia Edwards wrote the resume pieces, and then Donna Serdula, who wrote LinkedIn profile optimization for dummies. She actually is like the inventor of the way we do LinkedIn profiles now, optimizing them so it's not a resume. She wrote the LinkedIn piece. So I thought, I'm going to just write down like I'm a coach sitting next to you. I'm going to talk to you like I'm walking you through this. And I branch it. If you're here, then here's where you go next. So people wouldn't, it's like the You Are Here map in the mall. That's how I approached it. And people say, your conversation style, I feel like when I read the book, I feel like you're sitting here talking to me. And I'm like, that was not an accident. I did it that way on purpose. So that's why I wrote the book. But basically the reason YouMap came to be is because I was working with clients as a career coach, because I started as an executive coach. I was certified as an executive coach by my company. I ended up in learning and development after operations. And I was doing workshops, and I was helping with managers that were struggling. I was doing team building, all kinds of things like that. And I really liked it. Then I started doing volunteer work with people at my church that were unemployed, underemployed, or misemployed. And I got hooked on people who hated their careers because it affected every area of their life. It was affecting their marriage, their finances, their mental health.
Absolutely.
When your career's not going well, it affects much more than just the career slice of the pie. So I felt very passionate. I felt like I found my purpose for the first time. So I coached hundreds of people for free in a volunteer capacity before I ever hung up a shingle and charged anyone. And so I was developing a process that worked using these folks in this ministry kind of as my test subjects, if you will. And I realized that there were some gaps just in the marketplace because I was using a bunch of different tools, but people would say, well, yeah, that's true of me, but I'm also very creative. Like, yes, I'm sort of wired like this introvert and I'm analytical, but I'm also really creative. And I'm like, oh, this tool doesn't help me understand that. And then as I talked to people, I realized that's where the 4 pillars of career fit came from. That you have to, because I would hear the stories people would tell me and I would track them. I actually kept notes of everyone's stories and I would summarize different elements of their story, and I started to look for the patterns. What are the thematic elements?
Just like you had done years ago at the beginning of your career, which is actually kind of fascinating.
Yeah. So I've gone through my own program. I drink my own Kool-Aid. So yeah, that's the process of discovering I was in the wrong fit was really instrumental because I've been through that. But basically what I did was I thought, okay, here's what people are telling me. What are the things I need to assess in people and to pull out? What do I need to suss out in people to help them? And that's where it came down to, you have to use your natural talents in your work. You have to do work that aligns to what's most important to you, or what we call your values. You have to perform the skills that you enjoy and are good at. A lot of people get caught up in this thing that they do stuff they're good at, but they don't like because I'm good at it, so I should do it. And then I look at personality as the 4th pillar because your personality informs your passions and your interests and things like that. So that's where the 4 pillars came from. And I started patching it together, trying to patch it together. And I created this Word document where I put all of these pieces in, and I created my own values assessment. I have my own skills assessment too, but I use Strength Finder for the strengths because it's just the best. And so I'm using these pieces and putting them in a Word document. And because I have Maximizer as a top strength, I like things to be excellent. So I contacted a woman I used to work with who's a document designer. She does other things too. And I said, can you turn this into a professional profile for me? And she said, sure. So she created a template. And my husband works in IT. He's like a software architect. And so he built a technology solution so that I wouldn't have to manually put the data in, so that it would generate from this web-based program. And then what happened was people started to show their YouMap to employers when they would interview, and they would always get an offer, like 100% of the time, because the employers were so impressed at their level of self-awareness, which is the number 1 predictor of career success, by the way. And they were so impressed at seeing that, hey, this really fits what we're looking for. And so then I started to get recruiters and HR people contacting me saying, where did you get this? And I said, well, I created it. And they were like, what? Can I use it? So that's how the certifications were born, because people wanted to use it too. And I thought, well, I can't just give it to you to use. You've got to be qualified to interpret the data. So I better create a program. But I had a learning and development background before that. So I knew how to create training.
So much to love about this story, not only the outcome and what it is that YouMap is, but also what I love, one of the many things I love, is how, like, I call my career, it's like more like a jungle gym. And I use the jungle gym analogy only because jungle gyms are fun, as opposed, and so taking steps back or sideways is not necessarily seen as a bad thing, because you're trying to get somewhere else. And so it's like this beautiful tapestry, how you have used all of these things over time that you've accumulated. And together, this is what has been created, that without any of those other experiences, you wouldn't have had the confidence, the knowledge, the expertise, the knowing that you don't know and who to ask, you know?
Yeah.
I love that story.
And it's interesting because my mom is a coach. She's not a career coach. She's an executive coach. She works with CEOs and their teams. But what's interesting is she used to put me through assessments when I was,
my mom.
21 so I knew my Strengths Finder in 2002. I think I first took it when it first came out. I did DISC when I was 21. So my mother would tell me about myself. So I had all this self-awareness, and I didn't realize that had really set me up for success, even though I didn't like all of the work I did. Like, there were elements of it. I always chose jobs that I was good at. I was always a top performer, and I didn't realize that, because I would say to myself, why on earth would you end up in a job like this that doesn't fit you at all? And I didn't realize that people didn't know that. Because I took the self-awareness I had for granted, and I thought, okay, I know what's going on here. You don't know this about yourself. You don't know these things. And so I really, when I was a manager, I started doing this with people. I started disking people and Strengths Finding people and all this stuff. On every team I ever worked on, I gave Strengths Finder to all my employees, and Workplace Big Five, and any assessment I could get my hands on. And Myers-Briggs people, you name it. And I would teach them how to understand themselves and how it connected to the work they did. Yeah. So I was a coach. So when people say, when did you become a coach? I'm like, oh, that's tough, because maximizers, my number one strength in Strengths Finder, are good at seeing the potential in people and helping people move into the place where their potential can be lived out. So I've coached people my entire life.
Isn't that fascinating? You can only connect the dots looking backwards, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, at the time, my career looked like a joke. I thought, what on earth? I'm going from state government in the academic world to IT to reporting and analytics to operations and L&D. And I worked in nonprofit and in healthcare. I was all over the place. Had no idea I would get a passion for careers. And I'm like, well, look at that. All of that is very useful to help people now.
So cool. It really is. One of the things that I like about what you shared is how quickly you identified a gap that you didn't have. And instead of trying to fill it yourself you found someone to fill it for you. Talk to us a little bit about the importance for you and your experience about asking for help, because I know you're a believer and no one gets anywhere alone.
Oh, for sure. Which part of the journey about asking for help? At which point?
I think anyway, maybe you want to jump in. One of them that you mentioned was the individual who I think whose name you gave a shout out to, and I forget her name. Sorry. When you needed a document, you said she was a document.
Oh yeah, Crystal. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I totally stay in my lane.
Right? Talk to us about that, because I don't think a lot of entrepreneurs, there's this balance between having to maximize your financial resources while also maximizing your strengths and staying in your own lane. Talk to us a little bit about that, because there's some gray in there, kind of.
Yeah. So I do not do invoices or proposals. I don't generate YouMaps. I don't do any of that stuff. My amazing Mimi, who works with me, Mimi Rios, she's my project coordinator. She's got discipline and responsibility in her top 5 strengths. So she does all of that stuff. It's not economical. It's not economical to do things as an entrepreneur because you can. So first of all, it'll burn you out to do things that you don't like doing, which it decreases your effectiveness across the board because it's taking away your energy. Number 2, there's an opportunity cost. Mm-hmm. If I'm spending time creating invoices because I don't want to pay $8 or $10 to someone in the Philippines as a virtual assistant, which Mimi is here in the US, but so she doesn't get paid $8 an hour. But
just to be clear, I'm glad
just to be clear. Yeah, I just didn't want people to, not that there's wrong with being anything from the Philippines, but I didn't want people to think that she lived there when she doesn't. Yeah. So this opportunity cost, if I'm spending 2 hours a week doing invoices and proposals, that's 2 hours a week I'm not working on my business because I'm working in my business. And of course, when you look at the hourly rates of consultants and doing data entry or invoices or proposals, there's a problem, with that opportunity cost that's there. So then also, not only do you burn yourself out and you have the opportunity cost, but you turn your entrepreneurial role into a job that you were trying to escape in the first place. Because you were trying to get away from something you didn't love, and you turn your thing into something you don't love again. And I feel strongly against doing that to myself.
I agree. Here to that. I'm shifting gears here a little bit because I'm thinking about 2020, and at the beginning of our conversation, at the beginning of our conversation, we talked a little bit about that. I would love to hear what you have in store for 2020. I mean, I know we've got your book coming out, your newest book, in February, but talk to us a little bit about who you want to be in 2020.
So who I want to be is a more present wife and mother. And I know that's not career related, but I have been a workaholic for a long time. And I have 2 older kids who didn't have the benefit of me being around a lot because I had a commute when I worked in the corporate world running the L&D team. So I was gone from 7 a.m. till 6:37 at night. And so that I was like a weekend mom, and I'm not shaming anyone who has to do that. We got to do what we got to do. And I had to do that. I was the primary wage earner at that time. So I have 2 more kids now. I have a 22-year-old who'll be 23 this year, and I have an 18-year-old who'll be 19, but I have a 3 and 6-year-old. And I have a rare opportunity to do things a little more aligned to my values this time. And I'm not saying that, this is my values. My number 1 value is love and connection with my family. That's my number 1 value. And I am not going to say that's my value, like companies that put the values on the plaque but don't live them out. I think about you know how I measure this? The conversations you have when you enter partnership relationships with an intimate partner and you're telling them your life. That happens when you meet someone. You tell them your backstory. You tell them about your childhood. You tell them about your family of origin. And I don't want the narrative to be, my mom worked all the time, so we really just sort of had a relationship with dad. And, my mother was, she traveled all the time and she worked, so she wasn't really around. I don't want that to be what my future son-in-laws hear. Mm-hmm. I don't want that to be the story. And I don't want that to be their journey.
I love how you used, the experience that you had when you were 17 and hearing that eulogy. You've used that, you morphed it somewhat, and still used that experience to define how you're going to be, how you want your daughters to be having that conversation.
Yeah, I don't want my kids to be like, well, we turned out all right in spite of our mother.
I hear
So
you.
yeah, what I'm trying to do is increase I created passive income streams in 2019. So I'll really be doing a big push to grow those into organizations, DIY YouMaps and things like that. I'm not here to sell my passive income services, so I'm not going to talk about them. Suffice it to say, I want to increase my passive income revenue so I can increase my volunteer work in my community. If my community isn't better for me living here, why am I here? And then I want to be able to spend more time investing in my kids. And then I want to finish I have 2 books on the go right now. So I'm writing another business book, but it's a self-help business book. I've never written I guess technically YouMap is self-help. You're helping yourself with it. But I'm writing a self-help book to help people really improve their lives. So it's going to be 365 tips. There'll be like a quote, a little paragraph, a tip you can implement now to make your life better. And there'll be all different topics. And then a reflection areas for you to journal in. And there'll be 365 of those. So I don't know what the book is going to be called yet, but I'm working on that one. And I'm also writing a children's book so that we stop asking kids what they want to be when they grow up and teach them how to answer who they want to be.
I love that. I see so much joy in you when you talk about who you're going to be this year. And I encourage anyone who's listening to go over to my YouTube channel and just check out Chris, do you get that a lot? Do people call you
every day?
Kristin's face when she was just sharing who she wants to be in 2020. And I would love for you as a listener to explore that as well. And as someone who was working in the L&D space, the learning and development space a lot myself, I really didn't get very real with these questions until I was about 40. I would do the professional stuff. I loved all those assessments. But then when it got to my personal life, I shunned those reflections. And my life changed when I started to sit with those questions, and they are hard. And so if you are someone listening who is new to asking those questions to yourself and you don't even know the answer and you want to cry because you don't even know the answer, that was me. Don't worry, but don't stop. And so thank you for sharing that, Kristin, about who you want to be in 2020. I love that. In the busyness of entrepreneurship and recognizing that you want to be more present be a more present mother and wife, do you have any mantras or rituals or things that help to keep you sort of grounded and focused? And I see in front of Kristin's face her mug, which reads, what does that read, Kristin?
Do more of what makes you happy.
I love it. How do you use that then, other than just drink out of a mug that says that?
I drink out of this mug on purpose every single day so I can't not read it, because your life is a product of every decision that you make. And so when this is in front of my eyes every day, it helps me say, yeah, I'll go play hide and seek with you today. So I've always said that our lives are a product of our choices. And surely things happen to us that are out of our control. You can't control getting cancer, especially there's a genetic component to that. It's completely out of our control. We can control how we respond and react to that, of course. But our lives largely are a product of our decisions. And it's nice to set a goal. I'm going to be a more present wife and mother this year. But if I don't have actions daily, that won't point to that, I'm just going to be like a raft, a raft in the pool. It just kind of floats wherever it goes. And I want to be more intentional. So I set boundaries. I only will do one international trip a year. I will only do one trip per quarter now, which I'm cheating already because I'm doing 2 trips this quarter, but it's for a really good cause. So and if I feel like that the return is going to help what my long-term goal is, which this one trip will, then I can make an exception. But you have to have boundaries and learn to say no to things. A lot of times entrepreneurs will say yes to services that they don't want to do and they don't enjoy because of fear. well, if I don't take this job, I won't have money and things like that. I'm telling you, once I started saying no to things I didn't want to do, I actually increased my revenue. It's funny how that works.
It gives space for things that you actually want to say yes to.
You don't want to become known for the things that you don't want to do. People will write your LinkedIn recommendations around those things. They'll refer you for those things. And before you know it, you're attracting all this stuff you don't want to do. So I set an intention. I don't just set a goal. I set up the actions that I'm going to take. I block off my calendar on Mondays and Fridays. So I'm not talking to anybody on Monday and Friday except you. I'll make an exception for you. I'm not gonna do work on those days because I'm gonna take my girls to the park. We're gonna paint our toenails together. We're gonna do all those fun things. So I have to have boundaries, and I have to create things in place to make sure I'm actually doing those things.
And so I encourage anyone listening who does not have those in place to explore that a little bit, right? So beyond that, we do set goals that are far too big. There's an expression it's got to be a nicer expression than this, but how do you eat an elephant? One small bite at a time. Mm-hmm. And we set these big elephant-sized goals without really understanding what the smaller steps are, and then what those daily steps are. Those daily steps that are so small, it's almost impossible to fail.
Yeah. And, a perfect example is I'm going to lose 20 pounds when people set that goal. Well, when you gained 20 pounds, it was one decision at a time.
Right.
So what are the decisions that you're going to make every day that are going to lead to that goal? So don't focus on the goal. Oh, the scale says I haven't lost anything yet. And then you get discouraged and you gain 3 pounds because you ate yourself a tub of Haagen-Dazs because you're depressed. You don't want to focus on the goal. You want to focus on the activities that will lead you there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so my final question for you is, what advice would you have for someone who might be teetering on the brink of entrepreneurship?
Oh, you hear people talk about that question a lot. Is this right for me? Well, first of all, there are some characteristics that are common among entrepreneurs. Autonomy is a huge one. So people who just don't like being employed by other people because they want to be autonomous. That tug is probably never going to go away. But I would say you have to have a stomach for uncertainty. You have to be a little resilient. It's feast or famine in the beginning. You may not get paid for a long time. If you have clients that don't pay you as well, just getting the business isn't enough. You got to get people to pay you. Mm-hmm. I've had situations in the past where I had 12 clients that hadn't paid their invoice.
Crap.
Yeah, so that's rough. So you have to really, if you're thinking about entrepreneurship, you have to have a plan. And I wrote a post about this on LinkedIn, but you have to save. I saved 6 months of expenses before I quit my job. You have to think about, what are my expenses going to be? How am I going to make money? What is my plan to attract those people? What is my message? You really have to think about, how am I different in the market? Why should people hire me? And you need to think through all of those things, because here's what people think. Oh, I'm going to do this and it'll be great. I'm going to hang up my shingle and tell people, and boom, clients are going to come. And that does not happen like that.
Nope. Chirp, chirp, chirp is all you'll hear. Absolutely. And so those listening who don't know you, who may have just been introduced to you, Kristin, what is the best way for them to get in touch with you, to find out more about YouMap, and to even get on an email list about your new book coming out? What are those best ways?
Yeah, actually, if people hurry, they can get 40% off Your Team Loves Mondays on my publisher's website, blackrosewriting.com, by using, I can give you the promo code, but it's like New Year's 40.
Awesome. We will include that in the show notes. So if you can include that.
Reach me on LinkedIn, Kristin Sherry in Charlotte, in the Charlotte area, or you can go to myyoumap.com. You can contact me there and find out about YouMap there as well.
Awesome. So those will be in the show notes. Please don't try and write that down or text or whatever. That'll be in the show notes. Kristin, thank you. Do you have any final thoughts or words before we end the show that are just dying to burst out of you?
I always tell people you are a masterpiece, and a lot of people shirk that when I say that, but there is no one that's like you. Everyone's YouMap is unique. There's no one with your same strengths, personality, values, and unique skills, and your life story that encompasses that. And so if you struggle with confidence, know that you have things that no one else can bring to this world. And I like people to walk in that masterpiece. 1 in 7 billion person, 1 in infinity. No one will ever be like you again.
I love that. What an awesome note to end on. And I also wanted to let you know that you want to know what I have written at the front top of every agenda page is make today a masterpiece.
Oh, I love it.
So I thought that was really neat. So thank you for sharing that. And of course, thank you so much for sharing your time and your wisdom and your energy and all of your goodness with me and the listeners today.
I'm just sad it's only an hour.
Maybe there'll be a part 2.
I could talk to you all day.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Thank you so much.
And of course, a big thank you to all of you as well, my loyal listeners, and remind you that information about my radio show can be found at louisehreed.com, and grab any podcasts wherever you may like to listen to your podcasts. Also, a big shout out to my producer at Contact Talk Radio Network, Cameron Steele. This show would not happen without him because I am not the masterpiece behind the scenes in this regard. And of course, as always, a big shout out to the love of my life, Mr. J. Andrews. So until next Tuesday at 11 a.m., I'm Louise H. Reed, wishing all of you a bold and courageous day. And finally, in the words of Kristin Sherry, your life is a product of every decision you make. Have a wonderful day, my friends. Bye.